Alright, this is going to be a very short and sweet tutorial. It's on making a 3D side scroller with Unreal Script using Visual Studio 2008, the shell, and Infringe. Okay, so the first thing you need to do is you got to go into Unreal Kit, or Development Kit, to make a simple map. You can either make it going on the X or Y. I have mine along the Y because that's how I set up the script. So when it runs, it'll just run that way. It'll just run towards where the arrow is pointing. You have to make sure that when you set up the player start, the arrow is pointing the direction of the ground, or wherever, this part that it runs on, or else it won't work right. It'll just kind of get all messed up. Okay, so you gotta save that out, and you save that. You have to save it to wherever. You have to save it to your UDK folder. You have to go into UDK Game, Content, Maps. You have to save it into this folder for the map to load when you put it into the Unreal, or when you put it into Visual Studio. So you gotta save that out. You gotta exit out. You can't leave that open when you were running it. Okay, so the next thing you gotta do is you gotta go make 3 different classes. And I'm not going to tell you how to set up the folders or anything because this isn't a tutorial on Unreal Script and setting up the folders and whatnot. It's about making the side scroller. So the first thing I do, set 3 folders: my game info, my pawn, and my player controller. You can change the my to whatever you want. Just make sure they're set up like this. Okay, so to get the code, you got to go to the website up here. I'll have the link in the description. So you got to scroll down a bit to the examples calc camera, and you got to copy this bottom half here, and you got to plug that in to right here. You got to put that in right here, and then you got to change the defaults so that it's changed so that wherever you saved your project file to, you got to put that first in my game info, and then player controller class, my player controller, and then my pawn, and then just change it to whatever you have, sort of set up like that. Next thing I do is you got to scroll down to, I can just scroll up here. You got to go to isometric camera if you want like a kind of a 3D view kind of side scroller that's kind of up a bit, not directly sideways of the player. You can change that. You can change the angle of where the camera is. Okay, so you got to copy this pawn right here. You can just leave the defaults if you want. Just copy that with Control C. You can just put that into your my pawn class. Control V. Okay, so I like to have it set at 300. It's a bit zoomed in, not too far away, because this is how far how much the distance is from the player, and this is the angle that the camera's at. I like to have it at this. Just ignore that. You can just sort of mess around with that, play around with it for a bit. You can leave the defaults the way it is, unless you want to kind of mess about with it, like I have, just to sort of figure things out. It's the best way to know what you're doing. Okay, so now you're going to go to player controller. Okay, now you got to scroll down to the side scroller camera. And you gotta scroll down to player controller. This is gonna be what the player does, like, and how it rotates and where it's located on the map and how it turns and whatever. So you gotta go up here, just paste it in here, and you can just leave most of this. But one thing, if your map is running on the Y-axis, you have to change this to Y and this to X, or else it'll just get really messed up and weird. You also have to change this to plus, so that when it's on the Y-axis, D will be forward and A will be backwards, or the right will be forwards and backwards, whatever. You also have to scroll down here, and you have to change this. I can have the numbers in the description if you want, with the right here, if you can see them. Let's go back. Control V. This is so that the player is facing the right way when it flips, like turns backwards and forwards. If you don't have it like this, it'll just keep facing the way that it would if it was on the x-axis. It won't work properly. It took me a while to figure this out. It takes a while to figure out the numbers too, but this is exactly like 90 degrees or whatever. Other than that, you can leave everything else. You can also, if you want to take off the looking up and down to make it just look forward, you can delete that right off there. I don't want it because it's not the type of game that I'm making right now. Maybe later on I'll make a game that's a shooter, but I don't want a shooter. Okay, so once you're done that, you gotta go over here. You gotta right click your title of your project. You should know how to set this up. If you don't, you gotta click that. You gotta go to UDK, your newest UDK. You gotta go binaries, Windows 32, and scroll down to UDK right there. You gotta double click it. Okay, and then you gotta do the same thing here. And then the map that you put in, that we made in UDK, or that you made, you just press load map, start off if you want it. Make a map like that. Just put whatever you name the map. It has to be exact, or else it won't load the map. For start specific game type, you put Milo or whatever your title name is up here, and then my game info. You can disable startup movie so it'll load up faster, and put the open log window so that you know what's going on if there's an issue with it loading up. Let's check the error list. No errors. Okay, so next thing you gotta do is you gotta go back to where you saved UDK. Click your newest one, your UDK game, config. When you go to config, you gotta go to default game. And you gotta sort of do the same thing we did with my game info. You gotta change it to whatever you named your class up here, your project. You gotta put that here, .my game info. And for player controller, you gotta go Milo or whatever you want to call it. You gotta put the same title you have up here, and then .player controller. You can also, when you're done that, if you want to change it so that W is jump or up arrow is jump for your side scroller, you can double click UDK input, scroll down a bit. Okay, where it says W right here, it says move forward. Just erase that. Capital J, jump. You can also scroll down to where's up arrow? Up right here. Okay, up is already jump, spacebar, jump, whatever. You can just change about everything here. You can make it do different things. You can switch it up a bit if you want to make it to your game's liking. And so when you've done that, just click save. X out of that. X out of that. Okay, so now your script is ready to run. Just click start debugging. Just so it'll run the script. It might take like a minute or two. I can skip the video. Up or W is jump. Up is jump, and you can do spacebar too. And then D is front forward. A should be run backwards. One thing I forgot to do is in the script here, it'll set this to X, so you have to put this to Y. So X, Y, Z, like math. So just change that up. I forgot to change that. So you get this. Putting the 1 here just makes it so that it's enabled to the Y instead of the X, and nothing else. So when we run that again, it'll make it so that it flips back and forth like a side scroller would. Just give it a second to load up. It's just gotta rebuild the scripts again. Okay, so this is your log window. If there's any errors, it'll pop up in here. A lot of times, after you change the script about with the config, it'll tell you it'll say that the scripts are outdated. You can just run them again. You have to make sure you have no other UDK executables open, or else it won't run. You'll get an error, like superclass, whatever. Alright, so we're in the game now. The map's kind of going crazy there. I don't know what's up with that. Okay, so if you run D will be forward now, A will be backwards, and it'll flip back and forth. It'll shoot forward because in the script it disabled the cursor, so it'll just shoot forward. W will be jump, up will be jump. Yeah, and you can probably change it so that S is crouch and whatever if you want to crouch down easier, just so you don't have to click things. You can also change about the mouse buttons and customize the game with that. Just make sure you know what you're doing before you do anything, because you don't want to screw things up. You don't want to delete a folder that you're not supposed to delete. I've accidentally deleted this folder here once, and I had to reinstall UDK because it wouldn't run the scripts. Just make sure you know what you're doing, okay? Okay, so if you have any questions, just ask in the comments. I can put the links up in the description. And yeah, okay, thanks.